Hey everybody, this is Eli and welcome back to Elfbait. This is day 9 of the Dungeons & Dragons 30-day challenge. Today I'm going to do a substitution. I didn't like the question for day 9 on the revised list that I have, so this is a revision of a revision, but day 9 really... Excuse me, something in my mustache. Beard problems. So, day 9 on the list I had is something that's really hard for me to answer because I don't play. I'm not a player often, and so I didn't feel I could really answer this question all that much. It's the favorite PC that I would like to play. So instead, I'm going to substitute in a favorite PC that somebody has played in one of the games I've run. So this is day 9. Favorite PC that somebody else has run in a game that I have, or played in a game that I've run. So, being a DM, primarily DM for most of my life, there's been a lot of player characters in my life. And I will admit that many of them just blur together. There's not too many that stand out as, against the noise of, 100 fighters and 100 wizards and stuff. I mean, there's certainly some honorable mentions and some notable characters. And usually their names escape me too. I mean, they've been lost to the annals of history. One character that comes to mind that was particularly vexing, but was very entertaining as a DM, is I had a buddy who played a thief who was the most brazen thief I've ever seen in a game. He would pick the pocket of the town crier while the town crier is giving an address. I mean, all eyes are on the herald. All eyes are watching in the middle of the town square, and the thief would come up and pick his pocket. Because in AD&D, and first and second edition, if you could do it on the skill, you could get away with it. And granted, DMs should certainly interpret that, but I always figured that maybe it was a bump and grab, kind of the old standard pickpocket thing or whatever. So this thief also went on to steal the robes of a priest that had camped on the side of the road. He stole that priest's robe and his holy symbol, and then after that masqueraded as a priest of that order to get free room and lodging in the next town they went to. And then, as if that wasn't bad enough, on the way out, steals the holy symbol, the big gilded holy symbol, off the altar in the temple, as well as filling up a couple of canteens or water bottles or whatever with the holy water from the temple. So, very brazen thief. I remember it fondly. The character unfortunately died a grim death when I guess he started believing in himself too much. He started believing his own hype, and he got to the point where at some point we had a dying party member, and the thief, with the robes and the holy symbol and the holy water of the particular order, and having been masquerading as a member of that order, decided that he was going to take his chances and call upon the god. Because in my game I had like a lot of games you might have heard from back in the day, I had a divine intervention rule. So he goes ahead and, still masquerading as a member of this order, like the gods aren't going to know what's up, calls for help to heal his friend. Party member's dying. He doesn't want him to die. Heal my friend. Uses the holy water, holds the holy symbol, says an invocation, does the roll for divine intervention, succeeds, and I'm a fair DM, so yes, he succeeded. The god was called the god's attention was called to him, and answered his prayers, and heals the fallen party member, and then curses the shit out of that thief and makes him take every point of damage he just healed off this dying, like, mid-level character. Well, the character he had been healing was like a fighter or a ranger or a barbarian or something with way more hit points than a thief. And so when that thief had to soak up every hit point that fighter had taken, in the adventure, and had brought him to near death, killed the thief. It was fun. It was hilarious. Everybody laughed. Maybe the Thieves player may have grumbled, but that's a memorable character. But he's not my favorite. My wife had a character who was in 3rd edition, when we got the 3rd edition, a gnome wizard. And you know how I feel about gnomes. If you've been watching the channel, you know how I feel about gnomes. They just don't fit. What's a gnome? Anyway, she was playing a gnome wizard, and she had this cool idea of wearing the gnomish workman's leathers that are in one of the books. Basically, it's a leather suit full of pockets and slots for tools. And wizards in 3.5 was really cool. It was a great time to have a wizard character because they had removed most of the strictures that said absolutely you couldn't wear armor or carry a weapon of a certain sort. It just affected your spells. But leather didn't affect it. So she's wearing gnomish workman's leathers, and she's not carrying tools and stuff in it. She's carrying all her components. That was a really cool adaptation of an item. And so it made her gnome really cool and versatile. She carried a crossbow and this big staff. And I remember we had this joke about the flaming gnome, because at one point when this village is getting attacked by this group of raiders, think about barbarians who ply the Viking raiders who basically operate up and down this big river in this kingdom. They come down to this village, and they had this whole sort of Dirty Dozen scenario where they had militarized the peasants to try and fight distraction and holding engagements, against these barbarians, while the party did the real work, but just to keep them moving, keep them distracted, and keep them off guard. And so at one point, the gnome, my wife's gnome, casts this spell that creates this fiery aura around her, and she's standing up on the steps to the town hall, ablaze, and she's got this magic item by this point in the campaign called the Staff of the Ram Beast, which is this magic item I had created where it's just a big gnarly arcane staff with kind of a not a normal ram, but like a kind of almost like a fiendish ram skull on the top of it. And with a command word, that skull could fly off the staff, and a body would grow underneath it, and this fiendish undead sort of a minion would fight for her character. So she's all flaming. She's a little gnome, but she's on fire. She's holding this staff, and the barbarians are, ooh, what's this? They're kind of off guard, and she releases the ram beast. And so the flame that had been bathing her items, and so I decided that the flame maintained around the ram beast. And so they totally broke the barbarian charge with the sudden appearance of this fiendish totemic ram beast on fire and the flaming gnome. And so still really fun character, but not my favorite. Over all the years I've played, I think the favorite character the character that sticks out in my mind as my favorite is got to be Desmore. Desmore is a character played by my friend Derek, who is a friend of mine later in my gaming life. I've known him for a good long time now. I've actually known him longer than my youngest daughter has been alive. So it's been a good 15, 16 years. But, total, time frame that's a third of my gaming life. Thereabouts. So Derek had this character named Desmore. And so Desmore was an ogre. This is in the 3.5 days. So Desmore is an ogre. He's an ogre ranger. And so Derek had worked the character to where, he did not... He wanted the ogre to be as smart as he could be with the racial modifiers for an ogre. So Desmore is this as smart as you can be ogre, which is still low by human standards, but I think he's still got like a 12 or a 13 intelligence or something like that. So he's not dumb. And he's certainly above average or the high average. And because of that, the high stat, one of the high stats had to go into his intelligence to get worn down by the attribute bonuses or attribute modifiers. So he's not as strong and mighty and tough as other ogres, but he is also more dexterous and he's more intelligent than other ogres. And so, but just the fact that Desmore was an ogre ranger is not why he's my favorite. Why he's my favorite is that Derek took the time to make Desmore part of my campaign world. He didn't just create a character and say he was from a town or say that he was from a village somewhere. He didn't just tack him onto a part of my world. Derek took the time to make Desmore a part of the world. Desmore was the last of his tribe of ogres, his family of ogres. The setting at the time, the rest of the party had actually adventured up into a territory in my campaign world. This is actually my very original campaign world of Arterra. On the far east of that campaign setting is a place called Ravanya. Ravanya is a very Eastern European, Slavic sort of a setting. But they had moved their way up across the mountains, and this was the party. This is still the party that they just worked their way up here, and then Derek had joined the group later in the game, and he made Desmore. And so Desmore is the son. Well, he's not the son. Desmore is the last of his family of ogres. The ogres were killed by the Rangers of Ravanya. And so this is kind of getting back to what I was saying, why I like this character so much. So before Derek created Desmore, there hadn't been Rangers of Ravanya. The Rangers of Ravanya were developed as part of his backstory. He added to my campaign world while making his character part of that campaign world. Desmore was so when the Rangers had wiped out Desmore's family or clan or whatever you want to call it of ogres, they had stopped, or the head of the order, the head of this group of Rangers had stopped when he heard the crying of a baby ogre. And this baby ogre was Desmore, and he took it upon himself to create this, to do this, conduct this social experiment, I guess you could call it, of raising this baby ogre as one of his own. And so Desmore was raised as a human and as part of the Rangers of Ravanya. And so he didn't really think of himself as an ogre. He knew he was an ogre. Clearly he's an ogre. But he was part of the kingdom. And so it's interesting how these things trickle down. When you have a character, or a player, I should say, who really engages with the campaign world that you're running and makes a character that is part of that world, not just tacked on, not just assigned a location or some sort of connection, but is really a part of that world, things start developing from that character. There were seeds that were planted in the development of that character that then led on to developing more of the Ravanya location in my campaign world. It came down to a point where, we ended up with this kind of the semi-religious political war in Ravanya, where the old religion that was very much tied to the beliefs of the land, both the fairies and sort of the beasts of the world, sort of this whole folksy religion, old gods, was being replaced by a more ecclesiastical sort of orthodox belief system. That came out of Desmore. Desmore's, just the existence of Desmore and the stories that spawned from his character. So that through the adventures in Ravanya, this was developed. I mean, we find out that one of the reasons that this is going on is that the Tsar of Ravanya, the ruler of Ravanya, has kind of let his duties as a leader go to the wayside because he's off on some dalliance with the Queen of Winter, this powerful fairy queen that rules the fairy folk of the land there. There were involvements with the Unseelie courts, and the Goblin Market came into being in this campaign setting, all because Desmore kind of kicked this off. And so, yes, Desmore was a cool character in his own right, But why he's my favorite character to have showed up in one of my games so far is really because of the work that Derek did to make that character part of my universe, to make it part of the world, and actually build, and how that affected the building of my campaign setting. So yeah, so hats off to you, Derek. Thanks for a great character, and thanks for helping me to develop that part of the world. Someday we'll return to Ravania, and maybe Desmore will write again, but he'll do it in 5th edition, though. I mean, anyways, that was my substitution for Day 9 of the Dungeons & Dragons 30-Day Challenge. What is your favorite PC that somebody else has run in one of your games? Have yourself a great one. This is Eli from Elfbait saying like, share, and subscribe, and get out in game.